Nice view, that. Listen. Here a minute. Did you know in 1840, during the World Anti-Slavery Convention in London, women delegates, elected women delegates, were told to sit on the balcony behind a curtain? All at the instigation of, guess who? Watch my eyes. Who insisted that women's subjection was divinely ordained at the creation of Eve. Over the past 2,000 years, women have had a rough time of it. And some of the criticism and the brickbats that have been thrown at them have come from some of the church's more holy fathers. Take Pope Pius XII, for instance.
Women are gentle creatures in whose delicate hands God seems to have entrusted the future of the whole world in great part as man's helpers.
Behind these doors, it's a veritable beehive of activity. The congregation may have gone home, but there's another service in just a few short hours. And in the meantime, there's brasses to be rubbed, gold and silver to be polished, emeralds, diamonds, rubies to be huffed upon till free of the vicar's fingerprints, flowers to be arranged, and bookstalls to be tidied. And what invisible army will take on such a mammoth task? What army of helpers will do such a thing? Why, the ladies, of course. God bless them.
When Eve is described to Adam, the word used is helper. The original Hebrew word before translation was Eza or Eza, which has none of the subordinate overtones of the English. In fact, Eza or Eza is the self-same word that is used elsewhere in the Bible to describe God's relation to Israel. Women make up 2/3 of the Church of England's congregations, and God knows how many of the on-the-ground workers. Why is it such a majority do not have a louder, stronger voice in our church today?
Well, thank you very much, ladies, for coming over and agreeing to be interviewed. You're what I call, if you don't mind, the ground workers. You do all the hard work, I think, in the church. So I'm hoping that you've got some opinions about where women should be, whether or not they're in the right place, those sort of things. So let me start by asking you, why do you do what you do in the church? Anybody?
Flowers, I think, are a welcome and make the church look alive, to bring people into the church and know that we are all there, you know, if they need any help in whatever way.
I think the people, the visitors they like to talk to you while you're doing it. And oftentimes you get the flower arrangers from other churches come and they will discuss the points.
So something like flowers is very important, Lil?
Well, yes, I think it is. I don't know whether you're specifically speaking of our own church, which of course is rather different to the average church.
Yes.
But I think within any church it must bring people together.
Yes.
So you're not just fleeting shadows when you appear on Sunday morning and come back the next Sunday, because you can form relationships from it. Not only that, do they beautify the church?
Yes.
Whichever church, however small, however grand,
Yes.
I think even the smallest churches, it brings a warmth to that church and a relationship.
Yes. Let me ask you now about women doing these sorts of things. Why is it, and is this true, do you think, why is it that women always seem to end up doing those sort of tasks? Do you think there's a reason behind it? Would you like to see more men doing that sort of thing?
Well, I don't know whether men... There are a lot of men that wouldn't be interested anyway in doing...
Do you know why?
The flag. Possibly artistic, you know? You do get male florists, I know, but they're in the minority.
Yes.
Yes.
It might be the same as you don't get many women carpenters.
Yes.
I mean, look at the odd jobs the men do around the church, which we
Yes.
couldn't do.
Yes. Now, you do, we've obviously established that the flower is an important job, and the relationships that spring up from things like that. Now, do you think, any of you three, can you see yourselves doing anything else in the church? Would you like to have been, say, a church warden or something like that?
Not me.
Why not?
I don't know. I don't think, somehow or another, I'm just that sort of... I'm not all that good at speaking my mind sometimes, I think.
You're doing very well now.
Yes, but I think it's on a subject that you know much about, and I think, personally, I mean, we are of an age group when we haven't been brought up where... So I think, no, a woman plays a great role in different directions. And I think, even so today, let the men do what they do best, and the women do what they do best. And I think there you've got a very strong base for building up things. I mean, for one thing, men can't come into the church on Friday. Yes, I suppose they could if they were interested. But men grow the flowers, and the women possibly. You know, it's a link, isn't it? I think there are plenty of things for both male and female.
So what would you say to women who want to become priests? Women who say that they've got a calling and would like to be ordained?
Well, I would say, if that strong sense is there, I cannot see, as there is, I cannot see that women cannot be accepted. I know it's new and it's going to take a long, long time, but no one wants to relinquish you younger people will. Yes, you can probably see more ahead than we can. And the many, many things that a woman priest in the church could do. I was listening to one of the programs on the television. She could relate to women that lose their husbands. She could relate to the children. And so therefore, she releases the other side that the priest, male priest can do.
What do you think about that, Jesse?
Well, see, some women can talk easier to women, others can talk easier to a man. I mean, now I feel that when I go up to communion, instead of seeing the actual priest there, I sort of try to, in my own mind, think that it was Christ that was stood there. Well, if it was a woman, I don't know whether it would destroy that illusion or not. I mean, I don't see why not, but I don't really know why. I suppose it's just, a bit old-fashioned.
Philip?
Oh yes, I think it would be nice for women to join in and do church wardens and priests and everything, yes. It's like when you go to the doctors, there are some people that would prefer to talk to a female doctor. But sometimes when you like somebody
Can't see a difference
or vice
in the
versa.
So would you
Yes,
say
yes,
then there's a great big hole, really, then?
because there are areas that women are much better, so shall we say, at coping with than men priests. So you could say that there is something missing, would you say?
If there is a hole, I think
Yeah.
that there is a programme there now for it to be steadily filled in.
Right.
And I cannot see that there is such a great division. I don't know whether you're thinking of the hierarchy of the church, but I think there's a good role now for a beginning. I cannot see why, as Jessie said, she thinks that, she believes rather, that when she goes up to communion, that her priest is standing there as Jesus Christ. But then throughout the years, I mean, it's always been the male, but then we have a changing world. And quite truly, whoever is ordained is acting in God's name. So it really doesn't matter what the outside figure is, does it?
That's a lovely note to end on.
Well, I
Yeah,
thought
I
that
think
is...
the females want to dominate. I think it's just nice to have them integrated and
I don't think so. I think most, when you think of nuns, they're always very gentle people. That's how I think of them, and that's what I relate to a woman that wants to become a priest or a deaconess. I cannot. They're usually very gentle people, trying to sweep other people aside.
Lil, Jessie, Philippa, thank you ever so much.
Actually, women were seen as something more than helpers. They were the enemy. After all, wasn't Eve the cause of man's downfall? Wasn't woman the beginning of man's troubles? Even St. Thomas Aquinas had something to say on that matter.
It was necessary for woman to be made as a helper to man, as the scripture says. Not indeed as a helpmate in other works, as some say, since man can be more efficiently helped by another man in other works, but a helper in the work of generation. As regards the individual nature, woman is defective and misbegotten.
One Odo of Cluny, Odo of Cluny, once said,
To embrace a woman is to embrace a sack of manure.
it would appear that poor old Odo had problems. But be that as it may, these church fathers had decided absolutely who was to blame for Adam's spot in his naughty bits. Eve. Eve, the first woman, and all women after her. The guilty party. The tempters of all men now and forever. Amen. It is here that we meet that unholy trinity, sin, sex, and women.
The first reading is Midrash, retold from Graves' Hebrew myths. God then formed Lilith, the first woman, just as he had formed Adam, except that he used filth and sediment instead of pure dust. Adam and Lilith never found peace together, for when he wished to lie with her, she took offense at the recumbent posture he demanded. "Why must I lie beneath you?" she asked. "I also was made from dust, and am therefore your equal." Because Adam tried to compel her obedience by force, Lilith, in a rage, uttered the magic name of God, rose into the air, and left him.
What? God. Oh, blind. Sex. Rearing its ugly head yet again.
Well, you've probably realised by now that women historically are getting rather a bad time of it. And we haven't finished yet. You want to read this. The Bible.
Here begins the second reading. Judges chapter 19, verses 22 to 25. Some of the worst scoundrels in the town surrounded the house, hurling themselves against the door and shouting to the old man, "Bring out the man who's gone into your house for us to have intercourse with him." The owner of the house went outside to them and said, "No, my friends, do nothing so wicked. This man is my guest. Do not commit this outrage. Here is my daughter, a virgin. Let me bring her out to you. Rape her and do to her what you please, but you shall not commit such an outrage against this man."
Elizabeth Cady Stanton, a prominent American abolitionist and suffragette, said, "There are many instances in the Old Testament where women have been thrown to the mob like a bone to dogs to pacify their men's passions, and women suffer today from these lessons of contempt taught in a book so revered by the people."
Robin.
Well, as you know, Ian, I've been involved with the church for most of my life. I started my life, in fact, at a choir school at the age of 5, and that continued on through into my teens. And after grammar school, I then spent 9 years at sea, various parts of the world, meeting all sorts of people. After that, I went straight into the police force. I now spent 24 years in the police, serving in cities, towns, and indeed villages as well. A lot of this has been spent in the CID. I'm currently the patrol sergeant for Stratford-on-Avon, and in fact last year the town paid me a singular honour by making me the beadle of the town, which is sort of the marshal in charge of all the ceremonial, of which there is countless things at Stratford.
So let me ask you this, Robin. What difficulties do you see, what with women playing a more increased role in church life?
But, and I don't think it's a not unknown fact amongst many people. I'm what is probably called a male chauvinist pig. And in fact this extends into the church as well. I feel pretty strongly about it. Now, the term male chauvinist pig is perhaps a rather condemnatory term, and it is something which is applied rather willingly to people to describe things of all sorts and all sorts of characteristics. But basically my assumption of this is this, that having worked with women all my life, including for a fair degree of contact with women in the Navy, particularly in the police force and in the churches. Now, in all my choirs I have always had girls and ladies. And in fact, it's not untrue to say that they have presented the majority of my strength from the musical part of the church. And this really is quite significant because it shows that and proves to me that by and large women are far more loyal than men within the church. They're far more willing to put themselves out. They're far more willing to work actively and far more willing to give their all. In addition to this, you've got the fact that, speaking generalities, women are generally more intelligent than men. They pick things up quicker and they apply them better. Now, all that is on the plus side. They're more loyal, they're more intelligent, they're harder working. And there's no doubt about that at all. It's been proved to me over the years, over and over again, that those three characteristics are there within women, whereas they're not there within men. talking generalities, of course, there's always exceptions. On the negative side, the minus factors with women is that, firstly, they are more moody, they're unpredictable. You can't rely on a response that to a situation which would be similar to a response from a similar situation at another occasion. They are capable, and always women will show you the extremes of emotion. If you want to see the greatest love in the world, it's got to come from a woman. Similarly so, if you want to see the greatest hate, it's got to come from a woman. Vindictiveness, it's got to come from a woman. Bitchiness, it's got to come from a woman. They all show the extremes of personalities. Added to which, you have this problem which is probably created by society and its structure both in biblical times and through to today, that when you take the situation where your average woman is more intelligent and more hardworking than your average man, and yet society deems that she has to play generally a more secondary role, you get to the stage where, after they've gone through the diversions of courtship and the diversions of marriage and the diversions of having little kiddies, that by the time they're reaching into their 30s, they are then bored with their diversions which they've had so far, and they're beginning to wake up and realise, well, I am more intelligent than my husband. And they begin to feel frustrated. And this is the danger period with women. Women in their 30s and 40s, and indeed in their 50s as well, when they begin to sense this feeling of frustration, and that is when they start to make a drive for power. It doesn't have to be the church. It can be politics, it can be the local Women's Institute club, it can be anything. But they make this diversion for something. They're too late to go into a career and become a top-grade lawyer, too late to become a top-grade architect, so they have to divert into other things to cure their frustrations. And this is where you get the problems, because they then drive for these, and all reason goes out of the window as they make their pursuit for power. And this is where I've found and seen the problems over and over and over again. Apart from the problems that you get, as I say, because they're moody, you know, you've got the 14-year-old choir girl who stand there all night at practice and just won't sing. But you know, those are the sort of interim problems with you all the while. It's this drive for power. And, you know, having seen the number of women that are making the drive for power within the church, the vast majority of them, I put their drive for power as being motivated by this instinct of frustration.
Right, let's just stay in the church there. Now, what would you actually say to a woman who was seeking ordination?
Well, apart from saying don't, I would say, look, think very carefully on your motivations. Think very carefully as to whether you're going to do more good than harm. Because men don't readily accept women as leaders. This is within the nature of man. It's got to be a pretty good woman for a man to willingly say, I take up my sword and follow thee to the gates of hell.
Have you any biblical reasons for thinking that the way that you do?
Well, one looks, and one of the arguments which is put forward now is to say, well, when they say, well, Jesus never chose any women as disciples, and the answer to that is, but times are different then, women were in a much more subordinate role. I don't think that's true when it is put per se like that. Jesus did have his followers. He treated women with compassion, understanding, sympathy, And I think he possibly, if I'm not being egotistical, I think perhaps he may even took the same views as myself. He certainly got the same result as I would have achieved. Paul's teaching that women should not speak in church or lift their head, etc., etc. Well, again, that is slightly more extreme, but again, this is probably the same thing.
Thank you very much. That's great, Robbie. Very good.
Jesus certainly did not think women could only fulfill what has been called the cafeteria function. No, Jesus treated women in a revolutionary manner for the time. Jesus healed women. Jesus touched women at times when other Jewish men thought them unclean. Jesus allowed women to follow and work with him and for him. Jesus treated women as persons in their own right. And perhaps most important of all, women were the witnesses to the resurrection, all in an age when the evidence of women was considered of no account.
It was Sunday. I went to the tomb. I wanted to be near him. And when I got there, the tomb was open. The stone had been rolled back and Jesus' body had gone. I was scared. I thought the Romans had taken him, so I ran to find Simon Peter. I shouted, I screamed, "They've taken my Lord away and I do not know where they've laid him." Simon Peter went to the tomb and saw the linen lying there. He went to tell the others what we thought was bad news. I stayed there. Somehow I didn't want to leave. I felt him. It was strange. I felt him. I felt something. Then suddenly, two shining men stood before me. "Why are you crying?" they said. I said, "They've taken my Lord away and I don't know where." Another voice behind me asked me the same question. "Why are you weeping?" I turned. At first I didn't recognize him. I said, "If it was you that removed him, tell me." He said, "Mary." And then I knew it was him. It was him. It was Jesus. I was so happy. I was bursting with joy. I leapt at him. He said, "Do not cling to me, Mary. Do not cling to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father." I could hardly help myself. He said, "Go and tell my brothers that I am ascending to my God and your God." My God and your God. That was it. My God and your God.
Paul and Teresa, you're local people. You go to the local Methodist church, and as we know, the Methodists have been ordaining women now for over 10 years now. So I guess to ask you questions about women in the church seems a sensible thing to do. So let's start off straight away and ask you a question, and whoever wants to answer it, please go ahead. And is this: do you think that women are in any way oppressed by the church?
Do you want to start?
Well, I think personally that, as you rightly said, within the Methodist Church, we've been ordaining women for the past 10 years now. I think it's an affront to the integrity of women, not to allow them to be ordained. I feel that it is an affront to their personal being that one should even question whether they have the right to be ordained or not. I see it as a clear-cut case as women should be ordained, period.
Would you go along with that, Teresa?
Yes, I would, absolutely. Do you think women are in any way oppressed by the church? I wondered whether you could broaden that out a little bit and say, are people oppressed by the church at all? Because I feel that people in general are slightly intimidated by the church, but that's taking oppression in a different direction.
People in general, not women,
just
but
women.
people. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons they stay away from church altogether.
Possibly I feel that the church doesn't do enough to go out and find the people, but we're entering into another realm there.
That's right. Let's try and stick with women. I know what you're saying, and I think you're right.
So I think there's in that way, yes, I think there's a bit of oppression there.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. You've mentioned outside, you've mentioned society, which brings us nicely onto this next one, really, and that is, do you think that the roles that women fulfil in church, and this isn't necessarily the Methodist Church, I think all churches, do you think the roles that they fulfil in church are the same ones expected of them outside in society, cleaning, making tea, that sort of thing? Do you think that's the sort of thing men expect them to do within the church?
Well, I think this sort of defining these roles such as cleaning, tea making, I don't think there's anything wrong in those roles at all. I think they're excellent roles. I just don't think that it always need to be the woman that does
That's what I'm saying.
I think the definition of the role itself is altering progressively as we sort of progress through life. I think noticeably the last real indication of that was during the miners' strike. I think working class women, typical example, the ordinary roles that they were happy with prior to the strike seem very superficial when they've been through all of the problems of the strike and have found themselves in a new role. They've tended to sort of come out of themselves and want more for themselves and need more for themselves as human beings rather than just women.
Good point. It's very interesting what you said, Teresa, about the actual roles. There's nothing wrong with them at all, and that's what we're saying. It's just the fact that it always seems to be women who have to do those things. But as you said, there's nothing wrong with the roles.
Nothing wrong at all.
Yes. What do you think women should expect more from the church?
Women should always expect more in every role, yes.
Good.
Throughout.
I would agree.
Good.
Absolutely.
What do you think about women who seek ordination? Paul's already answered the question.
I just want to say this about ordination. To me, it doesn't matter who it is standing in that pulpit, whether they're ordained or not ordained, man or woman. I just think, a lay preacher is just as good for me, whatever.
That's great. Because
it's really a question of ordination to me.
Yes.
It doesn't matter to me.
That's another good area that we could go on for hours about the priesthood of all peoples and that sort of business. That's a good point. Do you know anything, or can you tell me anything about Jesus' treatment of women? How do you see the way he treated women?
Well, he obviously loved them greatly, and I think they loved him greatly, and there was mutual respect there.
And there was no...
And that was very obvious.
No looking down upon the fact that they were women?
No, absolutely not.
I find one of the loveliest passages in the Bible is when the prostitute wiped his feet with tears and her hair. To me, that is... unbelievable. It was totally and absolutely an act of worship, which I found a woman doing once again.
It's the epitome of love there, isn't it?
Let's end on that point. That's Paul and Teresa, thanks very much. That's my pleasure. Thank you. As Christians, we know, don't we, that the coming of Christ, the coming of the new Adam, meant a negation of the old ways. And as Christians, we know that we can stand up against such as sexism. We can become one in Christ. Here at last are some joyful readings.
Luke chapter 10, verses 38 to 42. While they were on their way, Jesus came to a village where a woman named Martha made him welcome in her home. She had a sister, Mary, who seated herself at the Lord's feet and stayed there listening to his words. Now Martha was distracted by her many tasks, so she came to him and said, "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to get on with the work by myself?" But the Lord answered, "Martha, Martha, you are fretting and fussing about so many things, but one thing is necessary. The part that Mary has chosen is best, and it shall not be taken away from her."
It comes from Joel chapter 2 verse 28 and is repeated also in Acts 2 verse 17 at the coming of the Holy Spirit. "Therefore the day shall come when I will pour out my Spirit on all mankind. Your sons and your daughters will prophesy. Your old men shall dream dreams, and your young men see visions. I will pour out my Spirit in those days, even upon manservants and maidservants."
Dennis, as you know, my film is about women in the church, with a question mark. As vicar, rector of Stratford-upon-Avon, Holy Trinity Church, you must have some views on women in the church. So let me ask you, what do you want to see happen to women in the church today?
Well, I would hope that women have the opportunity of doing virtually anything within the life of the church that men at present can do. That means I would expect someday to see women priests. I would certainly hope to see women bishops, and I won't live long enough, I'm sure, to see a woman archbishop, but I personally see absolutely no reason why women shouldn't have the exactly the same opportunity of exercising a ministry within the church that men have, and in exactly the same ways.
Can I ask you, what do you think the main problems, from a woman's point of view, shall we say, you see as being in the way?
I think one of the big problems at present is what one could term prejudice. I can think of cases when women have almost been persecuted. The church press recently has had a couple of dreadful accounts of how women who are carrying out a ministry as a deaconess, as soon as they're ordained deacon, they've not been permitted to exercise that ministry in the parish where they've been working for some time by the same parish priest who had been their colleague. This to me was a most horrible and dreadful thing to happen in the Church of God. There's a tremendous amount of prejudice on the part of some clergy, a tremendous amount of prejudice on the part of some lay people. And in addition, I think you find that some women particularly are less anxious that women should be priests in the Church of God than one might expect. I think there are a number of sexual and psychological reasons why they adopt this attitude. I think the other problem which women would have is that it's something which, I think as Dr. Johnson said, hadn't been done before, and it's always exciting but very challenging and very difficult when you're breaking new ground. I personally can see that if I had a colleague who was a woman here, that there were a whole lot of areas where her ministry would be complementary to mine and extremely effective. But I'm sure that she would have an exciting time because it's doing a new type of ministry in a parish here where there hasn't been a history of the ministry of women.
Yes. So what hope do you see for the future? I mean, long-term, short-term, whatever?
Oh, I'm very, very confident. I wasn't very confident this morning that it was going to be a nice fine day. I'm very confident that in God's good time that the whole situation will change. I think we've seen change in the attitude to marriage, for instance, when I talk to couples about using the word or the phrase obey. Most couples don't want to use the word obey because there's been a different attitude to marriage, that it's more of a partnership now between man and woman, and that decisions are made together. We've seen developments in a number of professions over the last 25 to 40 years when women have taken increased responsibility in different areas, with a queen and a lady prime minister. Well, I think there is still a little hope for the Church of God that it will be sensible about this and forget about St. Paul's dictums on the matter, which really related to his conditioning and his first century Roman Jewish background and culture, and I'm very confident about this.
Yeah, so that's nice, because you bring me to my next question. Can you tell me anything about Jesus' treatment of women?
Oh, I think in some ways that women's lib probably started with Jesus, really. I think the whole attitude that Jesus seemed to have to women was perhaps far different from the attitude in many of the contemporary societies. And that one of the things which Christianity really has done in many ways, in many parts of the world, has led to an emancipation of women and a broadening of opportunities for women. And it just seems to me quite incredible that the sort of final hurdle, as it were, of a woman being privileged to share the privilege which I have of celebrating the most wonderful of all the parts of the Christian Church's life, the Holy Communion, is not granted to her. And again, I hope that this is something which will change soon.
And Dennis, thank you very much indeed. That's smashing. Thank you.
This interviewer believes that scraping noise we thought was the wearing away of the foundations of sexism is actually the patting of heads and the handing out of sugar lumps. The voices of women must grow stronger and louder before they can take effect and stop women being pushed to one side with a there, it will come, it will come. And the personal neurosis of the church fathers have stood for far too long as Christian doctrine. In our present condition, how dare we ask our sisters to become one in Christ when we know we can't actually allow it? How can we ever echo Paul's words in Galatians? For as many of you as were baptized into Christ, put on Christ. There is neither Jew nor Greek. There is neither slave nor free. There is neither male or female. For you are all one in Christ Jesus. In her book, Radical Religion, Dorothy Soley said, "It is not from the center liberation will come. It will come from the periphery. Christ was not born in the palace of Herod."
Found that if you want servants of the church, women are the thing to go for. Women are the ones that will serve you best. If you want masters and leaders, don't touch them with a barge pole.
Do you see yourself helping in any way?
I probably ought to do more than I have done hitherto. It's something which I feel will come, and I think probably I should do more about it. I have, for some time, asked if I could appoint a deaconess to work with me in this parish. Sorry, I'm living in the past. A deacon to work with me in this parish. Unfortunately, for a variety of reasons, that hasn't been possible yet. If a deacon was appointed, I would be the first to lay hands on her head when she was priested, and I'd be delighted about that.
Rosie, do you think that the jobs a woman fulfills in society are the ones that she's expected to fulfill in the church? Washing up, cleaning.
That's right, yes, cleaning the brasses, washing up, catering. And women believe that that's the only thing they can do. And they're not actively encouraged to do anything else, like reading the lessons even. And as for taking the prayers, well, that's another big step.
Do you actually think that some women, they're locked into that consciousness, that that is where they belong?
Yes, I believe that.
I believe you have an interesting experience though not an enjoyable one, to tell us. Could you tell us about that?
Yes, it was my turn to do the prayers for Evensong one week, and we had to read the lessons as well, so I actually did take quite a big part in that service. The bishop was there as well as the curate, and they only did the sermon and the actual leading of the service. After the service, it was quite obvious that the prayers had been helpful to a lot of people. I had 1 or 2 people come up to me afterwards and say that it had helped them. But it was about a week later at a PCC meeting when the fireworks started, and we were discussing lay leadership in church and how women and men should take more of an active part in it. And one man absolutely disliked the idea of women doing anything in the church, especially leading prayers. And he made reference to this particular service, in fact. And when he was challenged why he didn't like it by the vicar, he said, "When I go to the doctor, I expect to see the doctor, not the cleaning lady."